Welcome back, everyone, to Stories That Shouldn't Be Told. In today's episode, I'm sharing a true, terrifying story about a forgotten roadside motel and what waited behind the walls of room 14. Every story is a warning. Some places shouldn't exist, and some voices should never be answered. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share it with anyone who loves a good scare. And tell me in the comments, what are your favorite types of horror stories? Your support keeps the stories alive. Now, let's begin. I was driving back from my cousin's wedding in Indiana when exhaustion hit me like a brick wall. It was past midnight, and I'd been on the road for nearly 8 hours. The last thing I wanted was to fall asleep at the wheel. So when I saw the neon sign for Pine Ridge Motel flickering in the distance, I knew I had to stop. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Half the letters in the sign were burnt out, and the parking lot was cracked with weeds growing through the asphalt. But I was too tired to be picky, and besides, it was just for one night. The office smelled like stale cigarettes and mothballs. Behind the counter sat an elderly person with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. They barely glanced up when I walked in, just mumbled something about $68 and slid a registration form across the counter. Their fingers were stained yellow from smoking, and they had this unsettling way of staring just past me instead of making eye contact. They handed me a brass key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag with the number 14 on it. No key card, no instructions, just pointed toward the back of the building with a crooked finger. Room 14 was at the very end of the motel, tucked away in a corner where the building made an L shape. The door was painted forest green, but most of the paint had peeled away, leaving patches of bare wood underneath. It took me several tries to get the key to work, jiggling it back and forth until the lock finally clicked. The room reeked of disinfectant mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. The carpet was a faded orange shag that felt damp under my feet. There was a double bed with a quilted bedspread that had definitely seen better days, a small wooden table, and an old tube television sitting on a dresser. I tried the light switch, but only one of the 2 lamps worked, casting weird shadows across the room. The bathroom was even worse. Rust stains in the bathtub and a mirror so spotted I could barely see my reflection. Despite everything, I was too exhausted to care. I kicked off my shoes, fell onto the bed fully clothed, and was asleep within minutes. Something woke me around 3 in the morning. At first, I thought it was just the unfamiliar surroundings, but then I heard it again. A soft, scratching sound coming from somewhere inside the walls. It would start and stop, like something was trying to claw its way out. I lay there listening, telling myself it was probably just mice or the old building settling, but the scratching seemed to move around the room, first near the headboard, then over by the window, then back toward the bathroom. That's when I noticed the smell had gotten stronger. Not just disinfectant anymore, but something rotten and sweet, like flowers left too long in water. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to ignore it, but the scratching was getting louder and more persistent. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and turned on the overhead light, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent brightness. Everything looked normal, the same shabby furniture, the same stained carpet. But the smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. I checked the bathroom, looked under the bed, even opened the closet door. Nothing. But as I turned back toward the bed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were dark stains on the carpet near the foot of the bed that I hadn't noticed before. They looked wet, like they were still spreading. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by complete silence. Even the usual sounds of the highway in the distance seemed muffled. I stood there frozen, not sure what to do next. That's when I heard the voice. soft at first, almost like a whisper coming from somewhere behind the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone calling for help. The voice grew clearer, more desperate, and I realized it was coming from the room next door. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard it again, a voice pleading, saying something about being trapped. My first instinct was to call the front desk, but when I picked up the phone, there was no dial tone, just static. The voice was getting more frantic now, and I could hear what sounded like furniture being moved around, like someone was struggling. I knew I had to do something, so I grabbed my room key and stepped outside. The night air was cold and still. All the other rooms appeared to be empty, no cars parked in front of them, no lights on anywhere. I walked to room 15, the one next to mine, and knocked softly on the door. The struggling sounds stopped immediately. Everything went quiet again. I knocked a little louder and called out, asking if someone needed help. No response. I tried the door handle, and to my surprise, it turned. The door swung open into complete darkness. The smell hit me immediately. That same sickly sweet odor, but 100 times stronger. I fumbled for a light switch, but couldn't find one. Using my phone's flashlight, I stepped into the room. It was identical to mine in layout, but everything was wrong. The carpet was torn up in places, exposing the concrete floor underneath. The walls had long scratches carved into them, as if someone had clawed at them with their fingernails. And there, written on the bathroom mirror in what looked like lipstick, were the words, "Help me," over and over again. I backed out of the room quickly, my heart pounding. Whatever had happened here, I didn't want any part of it. I ran back to my room, threw my things into my bag, and headed for the car. As I was loading my bag into the trunk, I glanced back at the motel office. The elderly person was standing in the window, watching me. Even from that distance, I could see they were smiling. I drove for another 3 hours before I felt safe enough to stop again. When I got home, I tried to research the Pine Ridge Motel online, but I couldn't find any record of it existing. No website, no reviews, nothing. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but I still have that brass key in my glove compartment. Room 14. I've never had the courage to go back and see if the place is even still there. Whatever was in that room, whatever was behind those walls, it was never meant to be found. Some doors open to things that never want to let you go, and some places don't want to be forgotten. If you're still listening, just remember, some doors stay locked for a reason. Like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories. And never forget, Room 14 is still out there.